Welcome, everyone, to the Super Smart Women podcast. I'm Karen Medina, your host, and I am so glad you're joining us today. If this is your first time with us, you're in for a treat. If you're a regular listener, welcome back. I'm so glad you're here. I hope you'll subscribe and join us every week where I spend time talking with super smart women. In this podcast, you get to hear the stories of women who serve, mentor, applaud, reflect, and teach others. In our time together, you'll experience their journey, understand their motivations, and gain some amazing insight about what truly makes a woman smart. Now, today, I'm talking with Chloe Wilder. Chloe currently works with the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society and serves as the Campaign Fundraising Manager for their Visionaries of the Year program. She definitely has a servant heart and a gift for applauding others. She recognizes their accomplishments and she lifts them up. So, yes, she's young to be in this role, but her motivation comes from a very powerful story and testimony. And that's what I want her to share with you today. Chloe, thank you so much for being here. I know your story is not an easy one to tell, but I know that everyone who hears your story and sees your victory will be inspired. So share with our listeners a little bit about your background and what you've been through.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Karen. I just want to say I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and chat with you today. It's such an honor, and I'm just so humbled. So by background, I'm born and raised Tarrant County. I'm a Texas girl through and through. I went to school out in Oklahoma, and I actually just moved back home at the beginning of June to be close to family. I was just super homesick, and I had done my time away and was like, you know what, it's time to be back around the people that matter to me the most. And came on back to just kind of hit the reset button. But with my background being in Oklahoma, I was there for nearly 6 years. So after school, I worked full time. I did retail management, and then I transitioned into corporate software sales and then HR consulting. But during my time there, where my testimony really comes into play, I ended up being a victim of domestic violence and now can thankfully and gratefully say that I am a survivor, but ended up at the age of 19 meeting a man that was just too old for me. And I was not in a place, I guess emotionally, I just hadn't really matured. I was very naive. I was definitely dealing with some dysfunction in the home and was just kind of teed up to fall right into this trap, we'll call it. So I ended up in a relationship with a man that was, 6 or 7 years older than me, and it became abusive very quickly, emotionally, verbally, physically, sexually, all of the things. I was stuck in that for about 8 months, which when you look at the timeline of your life may not seem like a very long time, but it felt like years to me. And I was able to escape that situation because he ended up committing a crime that was a felony, and we were able to get local law enforcement involved. And following that, we had about a year-long court battle that ensued just between getting a VPO and getting him convicted. And so it was about 2 years and change. Trying to summarize up like the event in your life that completely shaped and changed you as a person is so hard to do in a few brief sentences. But that being said, it completely altered the trajectory of my life. It altered my faith. It altered my view of myself. It altered my professional path. It changed the way that I love others and myself, the entire perspective which I live my life.
Chloe, that's a horrific story. I know you and I have talked a little bit more in detail about it. Let me ask you a couple of questions just because I want to help our audience. Because the purpose for us talking about this is, one, if someone is actually experience any domestic violence, we want to make sure to turn them in the right direction. So we're going to talk about that. And then two, for women who haven't, I want them to understand that domestic violence doesn't define you, but how you've come through that journey empowers you and how it's guiding some of the choices that you make today. So let's talk about, once this horrible experience was over, once he was behind bars and you're now in the process of recovering, how did you begin your recovery from this experience?
Oh, that's a great question, Karen. So I really was just in a state of complete brokenness, had lost myself entirely, my identity, you name it. because when you're in those situations, bits and pieces of you are taken until there's really nothing left so that they can have their way, right? And that's just part of the manipulation. But I realized walking out of court for the last time, I realized that I really had two options. And the first of which was to let this person ruin every relationship that I would ever have going forward. So my romantic relationships someday, my professional relationships, again, my relationship with myself, my friendships, and my relationship with my family, because I was already so isolated from them during this time frame. And I could let the poison of his life just seep into mine and take even more from me. Or I could run as hard and fast as I could toward the cross and do everything I could to not look back except to see how far I came. And I feel like saying that out loud, it kind of has this like perfect little silver lining cap to it, but that's really not it, right? I mean, I would say, Karen, the recovery process and just beginning to work through the trauma of those 2 years was almost harder than being in the situation itself, because you have to take the time to unpack everything that happened to you. And there were things that my brain had completely blocked out just because they were so intense. And I would not be sitting here today half the woman that I was if it were not for the redemption that I found in Jesus Christ. And the fact that my worth and my identity comes from what he says about me and not anything that happens to me on this side of eternity. And so I grew up in a church home, but I can say with like full confidence that I did not really choose salvation for myself, because that relationship is a choice that you have to make daily until after this. So when I was roughly 21.
I've mentioned this, I think, on the show before with another woman that I talked with. I didn't have my faith until I was about 27. I had a moment at an altar where, and it was an evangelist that had spoken that night, and he talked about having the head knowledge but not having the heart relationship and missing heaven by 18 inches. And it hit me. I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to miss heaven by such a small distance. And, that was the transformation for me. So I understand being brought up in a church, but you don't get into heaven on the coattails of your parents and your grandparents, right?
So true.
But after experiencing, something so traumatic, to be able to turn to Christ, was there anyone in your life that kind of mentored you through that?
Yes, absolutely. Oh my gosh. And I can tell you too, coming out of that and being able to share my story, because my family didn't really know what was going on. They knew something was up, but they had no idea to the extent. My friends didn't know because I was trying to protect them, because there were so many threats being made to me and the people that I cared about. And coming out of it, I had such an incredible support system. So my parents, for sure, they were amazing, and I'm so grateful. And I was managing a boutique in Oklahoma City at the time. And the women that I worked with, it was all women of all different ages. They were just the most gracious, kind, and compassionate women that I had ever worked with up to that point in my life. And there was one woman in particular. Her name's Tara. She actually doesn't know I'm doing this, so I'm just gonna like send this to her when it's done. But she used to be one of our clients, and she actually ended up coming and working with us. And she is probably about 20 years older than me, if I had to take a guess. And she just mentored me and loved on me and stewarded such a friendship with me, and would pray over me in the dressing rooms on the days that I would be going into court the following morning, and would just sit with me and listen. And those acts seem so simple, but when you have lost everything that you have and you are starting from ground zero at the ripe age of 21, that kind of selfless love that was given to me is not a debt that can be repaid. And it's not about what I have to do in return, but she absolutely changed my life with that. She's a mom of two amazing daughters, and they are just so lucky to have her. And between my mother and Tara and then my close girlfriends, I just really got a new lease on life. I was fortunate enough to know that the Lord loved me enough to put the people around me that would help pull me out of a pit that I did not have the tools or resources to get out of myself.
I think a couple of important things that you mentioned there is that it wasn't about anything that they were saying. It was about being present, being there, listening, not necessarily being the one trying to tell you what you should do or cramming scripture, down your throat. It was being the hands and feet of Jesus by just being present and helping you to be still and listen to the Holy Spirit in those moments. And I know without a doubt, having someone that, whose hand you could hold, whose shoulder you could cry on, whose arms you could hug through all of that had to be extremely, extremely valuable. So you not only endured this, you have thrived. How are you now using what you've been through to help others? Or, how are you planning to use this going forward? Because we've kind of talked about both.
Yes, great question. Thank you so much. I mentioned that I came from corporate software sales, which is you can serve in any position that you're in. And even if you do not have passion for your work, the Lord still has purpose in it. However, that being said, I am the best version of myself when I am serving other people. And that is why I got involved with the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, because although I am fortunate enough to not have a blood cancer connection, I do know what it is like to not have hope, to not know if you're going to get another day or week or month, and to not have any resources because you've never been in this situation before and never in a million years thought that's what your life would look like. And so I have dedicated my career to serving my community, where I was born and raised, which is very just full circle and special for me. And also just treating the people around me, whether they're colleagues or complete strangers, with as much kindness and grace as I can. And funnily enough, Karen, grace is not something that comes natural to me, even after what I've been through, so that's an active practice.
I'm named Karen, long before Karen was a thing. So I fight daily against that stereotype. But right. No, I understand. So, and sometimes I think when we aren't feeling gracious, graceful for others, I have to stop and think, why is that? And I usually find that I am probably under spiritual attack in some form or fashion, or I'm doing something really good. And therefore, the enemy wants to shoot holes in it, take me down, steal my confidence, make me feel like less. And I know that probably in the darkest moments, having been raised in the church, you were probably, screaming out, God, where are you? Why aren't you here?
Oh my gosh, so funny.
So what advice would you have for anyone that feels that, whether it be in, domestic violence or whether it be in, something as simple as I didn't get the job that I applied for?
Wow, that's an amazing question. First and foremost, I do just want to address something that you said, when you're like, God, where are you? I just want to encourage anybody who's listening to this right now that feels like the Lord is not working in their life or that he's very quiet. He is never hard to find. Just ask for him, truly. And there's so much scripture on that. He is never far. And my abuser did not want me to go to church, would not go to church with me, even though he was raised in the church. And all I could do was just pray on my own silently, Lord, please make a way for me to get out of this situation. If you are still there, please make a way. And then I didn't know this at the time either, but my mother, who didn't know what was going on, but just had this discernment, had this feeling that something awful was happening, was doing the exact same thing. And I didn't know it until after the fact. And the Lord did indeed provide a way in his perfect timing. And Isaiah 60:22 says, when the time is right, I, the Lord, will make it happen. The Lord's time, not our time. So just know, if you feel like it's not your time, the Lord operates on a different timeline than we do. So just be as patient as you can, as hard as that is. But the second thing I would say, specifically to if there's somebody watching this who is in a domestic violence situation, and or maybe you don't know if you are, but you feel like things are heading in that direction, you can leave. There's so much more to that, but you need to just find safe people and make a safe plan. It's not safe to just up and leave. I tried 3 separate times and it almost cost me my life. But if you feel like you're on the verge of that situation, do not wait. go find somebody safe, go do everything you can, seek the Lord. I promise he will make a way. He will. I just fully believe that just with my testimony. But for those who, when it just comes to, I guess, like general advice coming from my testimony after this, is that this side of eternity, we are not promised peace. We are not promised comfort. We are not promised ease of any kind until we are called home. But there is a book that I would recommend everybody read, and it's by Hannah Hurnard, and it is called Hind's Feet on High Places. And it is based off of the book of Habakkuk in the Bible, which only has 3 chapters. It's hidden in there, y'all. But it talks about how we must sacrifice everything that we are in order for the Lord to do a good work in our life. And I will tell you, that book was given to me last year. It was given to me a year ago, and I'm, over 5 years out of my situation, and was still working through a lot of the things that come with that, because, I do have PTSD. That's not something that goes away. And opened that book, read the first 2 lines, shut it, because the conviction was there and I was already in tears. But I do have the last 2 verses of Habakkuk chapter 3 that I want to read, because it is incredible encouragement. Actually, I might go up, Karen, forgive me, and read from the first chapter to begin with.
While you're looking for that, I'll add a note to say that we'll actually put a link to the book that you're referring to in the notes from the podcast, so that anyone that wants to will be able to locate that. So I appreciate you sharing that with us.
Okay, I'm just going to summarize this from chapter 1, and then I'll get into the actual verbiage for chapter 3, because it's the version that I'm in is giving me grief. Habakkuk was a prophet, and he is crying out to the Lord, essentially saying, how long are you going to let me suffer? And why are things like this? And there are so many times in this situation and outside where I've been like, Lord, are you really going to let this continue to happen? Like, are we really going to be here longer? Because I would prefer that we weren't. Whether it's, wanting to start a new career, or feeling like you have to move to a new city to start over, or leaving a friend group that's not serving your heart and your spirit and how you want to pursue the Lord. And Habakkuk turns around and in chapter 3, verses 17 to 19 says this, and this is my favorite set of verses from the whole Bible. And if you take nothing else away from our time today, take this, because it will get you through absolutely anything. The Lord tells Habakkuk, look upon the nations and be astounded, for I am doing a work in your days that you would not believe if you were told. Meaning that our greatest heart's desires, the Lord is doing a work in our days so good that it surpasses that. And that is incredible encouragement. And in response, Habakkuk says, though the fig tree should not blossom, nor fruit be on the vines, the produce of the olive fail, and the fields yield no food, the flock be cut off from the fold, and there be no herd in the stalls, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will take joy in the God of my salvation. God, the Lord, is my strength, and he makes my feet like the deer's. He makes me tread on my high places. Meaning that we can lose everything. And I did. I had nothing left. I had to build up every relationship in my life from ground zero. I had to move towns. I had to get a new phone. My car had to be put on a lift to make sure there wasn't a tracker on it. I had to get a new job. I had to do a complete overhaul on my life to start over, because I was being stalked, all these things. And I sat back, and you know what? It was enough to just be alive and to have another chance to try again. And I didn't have to wake up, and I didn't have to feel good, and things didn't have to be perfect. And it was really hard. The first 2 years in my recovery were excruciating. But every single day I woke up and I knew the Lord was not done with me. And every single day I woke up and I knew I had one more opportunity to try and live in the way that he has called me to. And to this day, like 6 years out, food still tastes better, as silly as that sound. I am grateful for the sunshine in a way that I never thought I would be. When things don't go my way immediately, I'm like, you know what? It's probably not that deep. It's probably not that serious, because we've had so much worse, and it completely changes your heart, because everything bleeds from a place of gratitude. And you can even be grateful for the horrible, awful things that have happened to you. And I can because the Lord has done such a work in my life and in my heart and in my family too, I would not change a single thing that happened. I would not wish that upon my worst enemy. And my hope is that we can create enough advocacy and share enough resources about how to get out of those situations and how to spot the red flags before you even get there, because they exist.
I think that one of the things that you brought up in talking about, advocacy and resources, the first step for anyone that's on the recovery side is to tell their story. And that's what you're doing, is that in telling your story and sharing your story, it takes that feeling that someone who is experiencing domestic violence, it takes that and says, I'm not alone.
1,000%.
There's someone else who has been through this. This isn't just me. These things that I am seeing, feeling, experiencing, this isolation that is being forced upon me, the gaslighting that is happening, all of those behaviors, when someone can hear a story like yours and go, it's not just me. I'm not alone. I'm not the only one. And I will put a list of resources that you share with me. I will make those available in the chat, in the description, because I want anyone listening to this to have immediate access to resources that would be beneficial in their situation. Let's talk a little bit now. We'll just change gears a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, LLS. We abbreviate a lot, but the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society.
Yes.
A big part of your role now is in supporting and motivating those Visionary of the Year candidates during their campaigns.
Yes.
So why do you think this type of campaign is successful? And why do you think recognizing others and giving them credit for the fundraising that they do is such an impact?
Oh my gosh, I love this question. Okay, so why it's successful. This campaign pushes people to be at their very best, whatever that looks like for them. So it's a 10-week philanthropic aligned fundraising competition where 15 leaders in the Tarrant County and Fort Worth community compete in honor of 2 local survivors. And those funds we take back into our mission. Our mission is based on 3 pillars, which is research, patient support, and then policy and advocacy. So it's successful because we are so lucky to live in an area where there's just so many incredible people who want to give back and do amazing things and take the time to do so, or who, are mission connected or not mission connected. But it is successful because it is so raw and real. A cancer diagnosis is so much more than you're living with this disease now, whether that they give you an indefinite diagnosis or whether they say, you have 6 months. It's so much more than that. And what we do, one, sheds light on blood cancer because it is the most commonly diagnosed cancer. Somebody gets a diagnosis every 3 minutes. 33% of those who are diagnosed don't live past 5 years. And we've been able to raise $1.7 billion in the last 75 years for research and to push the survival rate from 5% to over 90, and
that's the most impactful. When you shared that originally with me, the impact that LLS has had on the survival rates of cancer, and especially in those 3 pillar areas, because I know the same is true with breast cancer. The survival rates have gone. I mean, the research is better. The amount of resources that they have are better, but I think it's the awareness.
Yes.
And people actively knowing, what am I looking for? What do I need to do preventatively? What do I need to do to recognize early detection? Those types of things has dramatically changed. And it's through organizations like LLS that those changes have taken place.
Yes.
So talk about a candidate, like if you're working, with someone, past Visionary of the Year, there's ups and downs in their campaign. How do you, as someone who definitely applauds others, how do you help in those times when they're not feeling that what they're trying to accomplish is happening, or they're demotivated? What are some of the things that you do?
Absolutely. So much I could say to that. First and foremost, I would just say, because of my testimony, I'm not even a glass half full person. I'm like, if there's 2 drops of water in the glass, that glass holds water and a trickle can fill a cup, right? It does not have to be a deluge. a little bit of water is still going to fill that cup up. Fundraising can be daunting for a lot of people because whatever they do for work may not directly translate to that. But I always tell our candidates, hey, you don't have to be the fundraising expert. That's my job. You just got to be in the people business. And our candidates are, you just got to be able to love on people and use your network and spread awareness. And for me, I believe that there is always something to celebrate, always something to rejoice in and be like, hey, you know what? 99 of the things that we are doing may not have worked so far, but we have one thing that has worked. So we're going to keep doing that. But I also believe that it's never too late to change what you're doing, and it is never too late to start over. So, if we're in that campaign and we're like week 4 and we are not at the fundraising mark that we want to be yet, or this person is sitting there, they're like, Chloe, I do not know if I'm cut out for this. First of all, absolutely you are. You were nominated for this position by people in your community that feel like you possess the innate qualities to drive change in your community, in Tarrant County, in Fort Worth, in all the surrounding counties, right? And you have what it takes. 2, my job, if nothing else, is to make sure you feel like the biggest rock star this side of the Mississippi, because what we do at LLS, it is not an over-exaggeration to say that we are saving lives, and every single day we are one step closer to ending blood cancer, but cancer period, just because a lot of the research that we do has affected breast cancer. It has funded research for ovarian cancer because blood's everywhere. It's the easiest thing to test and do research on. And I think too, another thing is just knowing who you're talking to. Every candidate that I work with, even though they all possess these amazing strengths, they're all different, and they all need to be loved on a little bit of a different way. And so just fostering that relationship with them and making sure that they, one, feel like what they're doing is worthwhile, even if they can't see it in the moment, because it's 10 weeks. So it goes by quickly, but it's also like, hey, it's a fight to get to what we want to do, because we're setting big goals. My hope and prayer is that I am put out of a job with LLS in my lifetime because we have found cure.
There's no need for the society because cancer has been cured. That would be the ultimate success, right?
Yes.
A couple of questions I always like to ask. You're still young, so 13 is not that far away from where you are. But I love to ask people the time travel question. If I could put you in a time machine and send you back to talk with your 13-year-old self, what would you tell your 13-year-old self?
Ooh, my goodness, that's so good. I would tell my 13-year-old self this, and I actually still tell myself this every single day. It's on a sticky note on my desktop. And it says that you will live in a box of your own construction if you build the walls and allow yourself to stay there. You are the biggest person in your way. You are the biggest person who limits yourself, and your belief in who you are in the world around you shapes your ability to change your life and others. So if you are not watering your own grass and you're staying in that box, you will continue to stay in that box and you will never grow. It's like a plant that stays in a pot that the roots grow too strong for, right? It's either going to break the pot or the plant will die. And you've got to be able to move yourself into new places and new circumstances that are going to allow you to continue to grow. So for my 13-year-old self, and for my 24-year-old self, and someday for my 34-year-old self and beyond, it's to continue to not build a box around yourself, because that's not the way that we were designed to live.
I love that the limitations that someone might have are their own creation, and you can be anything that you want to. Just get out of the box, right? Build a bigger box, find a new box.
And I'll tell you too, to tie together, my testimony with domestic violence and then my job and career now. I remember, Karen, the last thing that man said to me was, I don't know what you think you're going to be able to accomplish. You will never be able to provide for yourself. You will never be anything without me. This is your ticket out. I'm the only way. And I was like, you know what? No, that's not going to work for me. And no joke, that is to this day what gets me out of bed in the morning. Now I help cure cancer. And I live a beautiful life that far surpasses anything I ever thought I was going to be able to have. And that is also because I didn't let somebody else build a box around me. Now, he was 3/4 of the way there, but, we were able to come out of
Tear that box down.
Tear that box down. And
right.
If you live in a box currently, great, take a sledgehammer to it. You can always start fresh and you can always be more. You are not limited to where you're currently at.
I love that, Chloe. I absolutely love that. Okay, so you mentioned a book that you've read, and I'm going to put that one in the resource. Is there anyone else that you follow, podcast, TikTok, or other book resources that you want to share?
Yes. So, and this falls, I will say this is probably, I think that her knowledge and her faith far surpasses age, but she is just a couple years older than me. So I really resonate with her, but I do think that women of any age can learn from her, like it does not
And
matter.
say her name again.
Sadie Robertson, the Whoa
Sadie
That's
Robertson.
Good
Okay.
podcast. I have been listening to that for like 5 years. And it's so funny because I'll get into a tizzy about something and my mom will just send me like her latest episode. But regardless of the fact that she is also young, she is so wise and she just has amazing things to say. And she clearly has favor because she has built quite the following with what she has to say about what Jesus has done in her life and what Jesus has to do for all of his children. So she has definitely been somebody that I have followed really closely over the years, just because that's a woman that's doing what I eventually want to do. Like my goal is to be able to do things like this more often, Karen, and to advocate for domestic violence and how to prevent it, and also share the gospel while doing it, because that's what saved my life.
I love that you found somebody to follow. You're like, I want to be just like them. If you can find that I want to be just like them person and follow what they do, listen to the advice that they have. And that's what I hope that women find here on Super Smart Women. I know you're going to be that for other young women and even older women who have and have gone through what you have experienced, that they're going to say, I want to be Chloe Wilder. I want to be the survivor that absolutely glows. And you are such a bright light. And I am so thankful that you have joined me today. You are just absolutely amazing. And I appreciate you sharing your story and your wisdom and growth with our audience. Again, to our audience, thank you for joining us. If you haven't, please subscribe to our podcast and be sure to plan and join us each week as I talk with more super smart women.